Before we open the dossier on one of the most classified failures in intelligence history, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Stories like this one, buried deep in the archives of the Cold War, often disappear if people stop looking for them. By subscribing, you ensure the history of the shadow world comes to light. Now let's go back to 1962. The air inside the briefing room at Langley didn't smell like tobacco and coffee. It smelled like anxiety. It was October 1962. The world was holding its breath, eyes fixed on Cuba, watching the chessboard of the Caribbean for the first sign of a nuclear checkmate. But while the president and his advisors were sweating over aerial surveillance photos of missile sites in the tropics, a different kind of crisis was freezing over in the dark corners of the Arctic Circle. Miles Thorne sat near the back of the room, spinning a silver Zippo lighter between his fingers. Thorne was a cleaner, company slang for the guy you sent in when a neatly planned operation turned into a mess of loose ends. He wasn't a spy in the James Bond sense. He didn't wear tuxedos, and he didn't drink martinis. He wore thick wool coats, carried a weathered notepad, and drank black coffee that tasted like battery acid. He was 38, but the lines around his eyes claimed 50. The room was filled with 40 men and women. That was the first red flag. In the intelligence game, you worked in cells. 2 people, maybe 3. A team of 5 was a crowd. A room of 40 was an invasion force. There were field operatives from the Special Activities Division, cryptographers who looked like they hadn't seen the sun in a decade, and heavy hitters from the paramilitary branch who looked like they ate barbed wire for breakfast. At the front of the room stood Deputy Director Vance Caldwell. Caldwell was a man who seemed to be made of granite and Brill cream. He tapped a pointer against a large map covered in a heavy acetate sheet. The map showed the Kola Peninsula, a jut of frozen rock and ice bordering Finland and the Soviet Union. "Gentlemen and ladies," Caldwell began, his voice devoid of inflection. 72 hours ago, we lost contact with an asset. Designation, Aurora Red. A murmur went through the room. Aurora Red wasn't a person. It was a machine. Rumors of the Aurora project had been floating around the cafeteria for months. It was supposed to be the successor to the U-2, a plane that flew higher, faster, and was invisible to the new Soviet radar nets that had brought down Francis Gary Powers 2 years prior. The Aurora went down, Caldwell continued, answering the unasked question. It was carrying a payload of telemetry data regarding the Soviet Northern Fleet's nuclear submarine capabilities. If Ivan gets into that cockpit, he doesn't just get our tech, he gets a roadmap of exactly what we know about his underwater deterrent. It shifts the balance of power overnight. Thorne stopped spinning his lighter. The room went silent. The stakes in 1962 were binary, survival or annihilation. If the Soviets knew the Americans had cracked their submarine codes, which the telemetry data likely contained, they would change everything. The US would be blind underwater. "The crash site is here." Caldwell circled a jagged area in the Kibbeney Mountains. Remote, inhospitable, and for the moment, seemingly unnoticed by Soviet recovery teams. The blizzard of the century is currently burying that region. It's grounded the Soviet air search. It's also grounded us. We can't get a chopper in. So, how do we get it? Asked a voice from the front row. It was Miller, a young paramilitary kid with a crew cut that looked sharp enough to pop a balloon. "We walk," Caldwell said, "and we do it with numbers. This isn't a sneak and peek. This is a salvage and sanitize operation. We are sending 40 of you, 4 teams of 10. You go in via a trawler off the coast of Norway, cross the border on skis, secure the site, strip the data cores, and destroy the airframe with thermite. You have a 48-hour window before the weather clears and the Red Army descends on that mountain like a sledgehammer." Thorne raised his hand. 40 agents, sir. That's not a team. That's a parade. We'll be leaving a trail a blind man could follow." Caldwell looked at Thorne, his eyes cold. "The payload is heavy, Thorne. The equipment to extract the cores weighs 300 pounds. The explosives weigh another 200. We need the manpower to haul the gear up the mountain and haul the intel down. And frankly, we need the firepower in case the Soviets get there at the same time. This is a brute force operation. Speed and strength over stealth." Thorne didn't like it. The company didn't do brute force inside Soviet territory. It felt desperate. It felt sloppy. It felt like panic. Your team leaders have your assignments. Caldwell finished. You fly out to Bodo, Norway in 4 hours. From there, a fishing vessel takes you to the insertion point. Good luck. The world is watching Cuba, people. Make sure they don't have to look north. As the briefing broke up and the agents filed out, the energy in the room was electric. The younger guys were pumped, talking about kicking down doors and sticking it to the commies. But Thorne hung back, watching the deputy director pack up his maps. He saw Caldwell's hand tremble slightly as he slid the dossier into his briefcase. Thorne walked out into the gray hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He lit a cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign. He had a feeling that the cold in the Kibini Mountains wasn't going to be the only thing that bit them. Sending 40 agents into the heart of the Soviet Union wasn't a mission, it was a gamble. And Miles Thorne knew that the house always wins. Chapter 2. The Manifest. The flight to Norway was taken on a C-130 transport, disguised as a supply run for NATO bases. The interior of the plane was a cavern of rattling metal and canvas seats. 40 operatives sat in 2 long rows, knees knocking together in the cramped space. The roar of the engines made conversation difficult, which gave Thorne plenty of time to study the people who were about to walk into the freezer with him. The group was divided into 4 squads: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Alpha was the muscle, heavily armed, carrying the bulk of the bars, Browning automatic rifles, and explosives. They were led by Captain Duke Reynolds, a man who had seen action in Korea and reportedly enjoyed it a little too much. Bravo was the technical team. They were the ones who had to crack the Aurora's fuselage and extract the magnetic tapes without erasing them. They were softer, smarter, carrying delicate tools in padded cases. Their leader was a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Thorne knew her by reputation. She was one of the few women in the field operations division, a cryptanalyst who could take apart a radio with a pocket knife and put it back together blindfolded. She sat across from him, reading a paperback novel, seemingly unbothered by the turbulence. Charlie was support and medical. They carried the extra rations, the sleds, and the trauma kits. Delta was Thorne's team. They were the fixers. Their job was perimeter security and, if things went south, ensuring that nothing and nobody was left behind for the Soviets to interrogate. It was the Grim Reaper Squad. "Hey, old-timer!" a voice shouted over the engine noise. It was Miller, the kid from the briefing. He was sitting next to Thorne, polishing his rifle with a rag. "You ever been this far north?" Thorne took a drag from his cigarette, exhaling a plume of blue smoke. "Once. 56. Not a vacation spot. I hear the northern lights or something else," Miller said, grinning. "My girl back in Ohio, she made me promise to describe them to her." Thorne looked at the kid. He was green, bright-eyed. He treated the Cold War like a football game where his side was guaranteed to win because they were the good guys. Thorne envied that ignorance. "Keep your eyes on the horizon, kid. If you're looking up at the lights, you won't see the patrol coming." Miller laughed, dismissing the warning. "We got 40 guys. Even if Ivan shows up, we'll outgun him." That was the dangerous thinking Caldwell had instilled in them. 40 agents felt like an army, but in the vast white emptiness of the Soviet Arctic, 40 men were just 40 specks of dust. Sarah Jenkins looked up from her book. She caught Thorne's eye. She didn't smile. She offered a slight nod, a recognition of shared skepticism. She closed her book and leaned forward. "You don't like the numbers either," she said, her voice cutting through the drone of the props. "It's too heavy," Thorne replied. "Too many moving parts. If one guy breaks a leg or one guy panics, the whole column stops. We're a caterpillar, slow and exposed." "I checked the manifest," Jenkins said, lowering her voice. "The equipment list includes thermite, C4, and standard field rations. But there's a crate in the back marked for special handling. It wasn't in the general briefing." Thorne frowned. "What's in it?" "Geiger counters," she whispered. "And lead-lined containment suits. 3 of them." Thorne felt a chill that had nothing to do with the altitude. The briefing said the plane was reconnaissance, telemetry data, cameras. "Since when do cameras require lead suits?" Jenkins asked. Caldwell is holding back. That plane isn't just taking pictures, it's carrying something nuclear, or it's powered by something nuclear. If it's a nuclear propulsion prototype. Thorne let the thought trail off. The US had been experimenting with nuclear-powered aircraft, projects that could stay airborne for weeks. But the radiation shielding was heavy, and the risks of a crash were catastrophic. If the Aurora was nuclear and it cracked open on a Soviet mountain, they weren't just retrieving tapes. They were cleaning up a dirty bomb. "Does Reynolds know?" Thorne asked, nodding toward the Alpha team leader. "If he does, he isn't saying," Jenkins replied. "But if we get up there and find a leaking reactor, 40 men won't be enough. We'll be dead in a week from radiation sickness." Thorne looked back at Miller, who was now showing a picture of his girlfriend to the guy next to him. The kid had no idea. "We stick close," Thorne told Jenkins. "When we hit the ground, Delta and Bravo move together. If that wreck is hot, I want my team knowing about it first so we can decide whether to complete the mission or abort." "Abort?" Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "You think Caldwell will let us just walk away? If the alternative is glowing in the dark." Thorne crushed his cigarette out on the metal floor. "Caldwell isn't here, we are." The plane banked, beginning its descent toward the Norwegian coast. The mood in the cabin shifted from boredom to anticipation. Gear was checked, straps were tightened. The lights in the cabin turned red, casting a blood-colored wash over the 40 faces. Thorne closed his eyes for a second. He had a bad feeling that the special handling crate was just the first of many lies they had been fed. The mission was already mutating, changing from a simple grab and go into something darker. As the ramp lowered into the biting Nordic air, the cold rushed in to greet them. It was a warning. "Turn back," the wind seemed to scream. "Turn back while you still can." But they stepped off the plane, 40 souls marching toward the edge of the world. Chapter 3. The Crossing. The trawler was a rusted bucket of bolts called the Isbjørn. It smelled of diesel and fish guts. The captain was a Norwegian who had been paid enough gold to buy a new boat 3 times over, and he knew enough to keep his mouth shut. They sailed under the cover of a moonless night. The Barents Sea was rough, tossing the heavy vessel like a toy. Below deck, 40 agents were crammed into the hold, seasick and silent. The bravado from the plane had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of the insertion. They were dropped 3 miles off the coast of the Kola Peninsula. The water was black and freezing. They utilized Zodiac rubber boats, the engines muffled to a low hum. The spray from the waves froze instantly on their jackets. Thorne steered the lead boat, his eyes scanning the shoreline through night vision binoculars, primitive, bulky tech that turned the world into a grainy green blur. The coast looked desolate. Jagged rocks, snow-covered pines, and nothing else. No lights, no patrols. "Clear," he whispered into his radio. The boats hit the gravel beach with a wet crunch. In seconds, the agents were out, dragging the heavy sleds of equipment onto the snow. The boats were deflated, weighted down with rocks, and sunk in the deep water. There was no extraction by sea. The plan was to hike over the ridge to a predefined extraction point near the Finnish border, 20 miles away, after the objective was complete. "Move out," Reynolds barked, his voice low but carrying authority. They formed a column. Alpha on point, Bravo and the sleds in the center, Charlie flanking, and Thorne's Delta team bringing up the rear. They strapped on cross-country skis. The snow was deep, powder over hard ice. The trek began. For the first 6 hours, the only sound was the rhythmic swish-clack of skis and the heavy breathing of men exerting themselves in sub-zero temperatures. The temperature was minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes. The fluid in your eyes starts to thicken. Thorne kept his head on a swivel. He wasn't looking at the trees. He was looking at the spaces between them. He was looking for the unnatural shapes, the straight lines that didn't exist in nature. By dawn, a gray, watery light that offered no warmth, they had covered 8 miles. They were entering the foothills of the Kibbeney Mountains. The terrain was getting steeper. "Hold up!" Reynolds signaled from the front. The column halted. Thorne skied forward to the front of the line. Reynolds was kneeling in the snow, looking at a depression in the powder. "What is it?" Thorne asked. "Reindeer track," Reynolds said. "Or maybe a patrol using sleds." Thorne examined the track. It was faint, wind-blown. "Too wide for reindeer. That's a man. But he's not on skis. He's on snowshoes." "Local hunter," Reynolds suggested. "Maybe," Thorne said. "But look at the stride, it's uniform, determined." A hunter stops, looks around, changes direction. This track goes straight as an arrow toward the pass. A scout, Reynolds muttered. If it's a scout, he's seen us, Thorne said. Or he heard the boats. We press on, Reynolds said, standing up. We're behind schedule. We should flank, Thorne argued. Send a team wide, if there's an ambush waiting in the pass. No time, Reynolds cut him off. The weather reports say the blizzard is circling back. We have 12 hours to reach the crash site before visibility drops to 0. We go through the pass. Thorne didn't like it, but Reynolds was technically the mission commander. Thorne returned to the rear guard. He tapped his radio. Delta team, safety's off. Watch the ridges. They moved into the pass. It was a narrow canyon with sheer rock walls rising 200 feet on either side. It was a natural choke point, a kill box. Thorne felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The silence was too absolute. No wind, no birds. Just the sound of 40 people shuffling toward their fate. He looked up at the ridgeline. For a split second, he thought he saw a glint. Not metal. Metal would be painted white. Glass. A scope. Contact right! Thorne screamed, diving into the snow. The crack of the rifle shot was deafening in the canyon. The bullet didn't hit Thorne. It hit the man next to him, a Charlie team medic. The man dropped without a sound, a red mist spraying onto the pristine white snow. Ambush! Reynolds yelled. Take cover! But there was no cover. They were in a bowling alley and the pins were being knocked down. Automatic fire erupted from both ridgelines. It wasn't the chaotic spray of guerrilla fighters, it was the disciplined, rhythmic fire of trained soldiers. The CIA agents returned fire, the chaotic roar of bars and Thompson submachine guns echoing off the canyon walls. But they were shooting at ghosts. The attackers were dug in, high up, invisible against the snow. Smoke! Thorne yelled. Pop smoke! Miller, the kid from the plane, fumbled with a grenade canister. He pulled the pin and threw it. Thick purple smoke began to fill the canyon floor, obscuring their vision, but also hiding them from the snipers. We need to move forward, Reynolds shouted over the din. Push through the smoke. No! Thorne grabbed Reynolds by the shoulder. That's what they want. They're hurting us deeper. We need to retreat to the tree line. We don't retreat, Reynolds shoved Thorne back. Alpha, on me. Charge the ridge. It was suicide. Thorne watched in horror as Reynolds and 6 men from Alpha Team tried to scramble up the scree slope toward the enemy fire. They made it 10 yards before the machine gun nests opened up. They were cut down in seconds. The snow was no longer white. Bravo! Delta! Thorne took command. Grab the sleds! Fall back! Now! Chaos reigned. The 40-man force was fracturing. Some followed Reynolds' dying order and were pinned down. Others were frozen in panic. Thorne grabbed Jenkins by the harness of her coat. Move! He screamed. They dragged the heavy equipment sleds back the way they came, using the smoke as a screen. Bullets zipped past them, popping into the snow like angry hornets. They reached the tree line, breathless and terrified. Thorne did a quick head count. 22. They had lost 18 men in 3 minutes. The mission had gone from a recovery operation to a disaster in the blink of an eye. Thorne looked back at the canyon. The shooting had stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. They stopped firing. Miller gasped, clutching his rifle. He was shaking. Why did they stop? Because they don't need to shoot anymore, Thorne said grimly. They separated us. They took out our command. Now they're going to hunt us down. He looked at Jenkins. She was pale, but her eyes were focused. The Geiger counters, she said. We left the sled with the Geiger counters. Thorne looked at the remaining sleds. They had the explosives, they had the tools, but the radiation suits and the counters were lying in the blood-soaked snow of the canyon. We don't need them, Thorne lied. We just need to get to the plane, get the tapes, and get out. But he knew. He knew that the ambush wasn't just a patrol. They were waiting. The Soviets knew they were coming. And now, half the team was dead, the element of surprise was gone, and they were walking into a radioactive trap with no protection. Check your ammo, Thorne said, his voice flat. We aren't going back to the beach. The only way out is through the mountain. We take the high route, over the ridge. As the survivors regrouped, shivering in the adrenaline crash, the first snowflakes of the returning blizzard began to fall. The white silence was coming back to claim the rest of them. Chapter 4. The frequency. The climb up the eastern ridge was agony. To avoid the kill box of the canyon, Thorne led the remaining 22 agents up a 60-degree incline of ice and rock. They had to abandon the heaviest sleds, redistributing the explosives and tools into backpacks. Every pound felt like 50. By the time they reached the plateau, the blizzard had arrived in full force. Visibility was reduced to 5 feet. The wind howled like a banshee, a physical force that tried to push them off the mountain. They roped themselves together, a long chain of misery, stepping in each other's footprints. Thorne was at the front, navigating by compass and instinct. He couldn't shake the image of the ambush. It was too perfect. The enemy knew exactly when they would enter the pass. That meant one thing: a leak. Someone in Langley, or maybe someone on the boat, had sold them out. "Thorne!" Jenkins shouted over the wind. She was directly behind him on the rope line. He stopped, turning back. She was holding a handheld radio receiver, part of the Bravo team's gear. She had an earpiece in. "I'm picking up a signal," she yelled. "From the plane?" Thorne asked. "No, it's shortwave. Wideband. It's coming from everywhere." Thorne grabbed the receiver and held it to his ear. Through the static of the storm, he heard it. It wasn't Russian. It wasn't Morse code. It was music. "I fall to pieces each time I see you again." It was Patsy Cline, an American country song, broadcasting on a loop. "What the hell is that?" Miller asked, huddled close. "Psychological warfare," Thorne said. "They're taunting us." "Or they're guiding us," Jenkins said. "Look at the signal strength. It gets stronger toward the north, toward the crash site." "Why would they broadcast Patsy Cline?" Miller asked, his teeth chattering. "To let us know that they know who we are," Thorne said. "And to drown out our own comms." He checked his long-range radio. Static. The music was jamming their frequency back to the trawler. They were completely cut off. They trudged on. The music played in their heads, a ghostly soundtrack to their slow march. Hours passed. Frostbite was nipping at their noses and fingertips. One of the men from Charlie team simply sat down in the snow. "Get up, Henderson," Thorne barked. "Just a minute," Henderson mumbled. "Just resting my eyes." "If you close your eyes, you don't open them again." Thorne hauled the man to his feet. "Keep moving." But Henderson stumbled again 10 minutes later. Then he collapsed. When Thorne checked his pulse, it was faint. Hypothermia. The body was shutting down. "We can't carry him," one of the Alpha survivors said. "We're barely moving as it is." Thorne looked at Henderson. The man was already delirious, smiling at something only he could see. "Leave him a ration bar," Thorne said, his heart hardening. "Mark the spot on the map. We keep moving." It was a death sentence, and they all knew it. But stopping meant they all died. They left Henderson sitting against a rock, the snow quickly covering his legs. By nightfall, or what passed for it in the perpetual gray gloom, they reached the coordinates. The storm broke for a moment, the clouds parting to reveal a valley below them. And there it was, the Aurora. It wasn't smashed into pieces. It hadn't plowed a furrow into the earth. It was sitting in the middle of a frozen lake, resting on its belly. The wings were intact. The fuselage was sleek, black and ominous. It looked like a predatory bird resting on the ice. "It landed," Jenkins whispered. "It didn't crash. The pilot landed it." "Why?" Miller asked. "Mechanical failure," Jenkins guessed. "Or he defected," Thorne said darkly. Brought the bird down gently to hand it over. "Look," Thorne pointed. Around the plane, the snow was undisturbed. No tracks, no vehicles, no Soviet recovery team. "Where are they?" Miller asked. "If they ambushed us in the pass, why aren't they securing the prize?" "Maybe they don't want to get close to it," Jenkins said, glancing at the empty space where the Geiger counters should have been. "We go in," Thorne said. "Quick and dirty. Bravo team, get the hatch open. Get the tapes. Alpha, set the charges on the fuel tanks and the cockpit. We blow it and we leave." They descended into the valley. The wind died down. The silence returned. The Patsy Cline music had stopped. As they stepped onto the ice of the frozen lake, Thorne felt a vibration through his boots. A low hum. "You feel that?" he asked. "The ice is shifting," Miller said nervously. "No," Jenkins said, staring at the black plane. "That's the plane. The engines. They're still running." The Aurora had been down for 3 days. No jet engine could run on idle for 3 days without fuel. "Nuclear," Jenkins said, her voice trembling. "It is nuclear. The reactor is active." Thorne signaled for them to stop. They were 50 yards from the plane. The black metal seemed to absorb the light. "Masks on," Thorne ordered. "If you have scarves, wrap them tight. Don't breathe the air near the vents." They approached the aircraft like it was a sleeping dragon. Thorne climbed onto the wing, his boots slipping on the icy metal. He reached the cockpit canopy. It was frosted over from the inside. He wiped the glass with his glove. He shone his flashlight inside. The cockpit was empty. No pilot, no body, no blood. But on the control panel, the lights were blinking green. The systems were live. Thorne pulled the emergency release lever. With a hiss of hydraulic pressure, the canopy popped open. A wave of warm, stale air rushed out. "Clear!" Thorne yelled. "Get the tapes!" Jenkins and 2 other techs scrambled up. They dove into the avionics bay behind the pilot's seat. "Thorne!" Jenkins yelled from inside. "The drive bay. It's empty." Thorne dropped into the cockpit. She was right. The slots where the magnetic data cores should have been were vacant. "Someone beat us to it?" Miller asked from the wing. "No," Thorne said, looking at the dust on the console. "There are no finger marks, no signs of removal." He looked at the flight log on the kneeboard. It was blank. The plane, Thorne realized, a pit opening in his stomach. It never flew a mission. It was never carrying data. "What?" Jenkins asked. "It's a decoy," Thorne said. "A lure." Suddenly, floodlights erupted from the tree line surrounding the lake. Blinding white stadium lights turned the valley into noonday brightness. A loudspeaker crackled to life, echoing off the mountains. "Please," a voice said in perfect, unaccented English. "Step away from the vehicle. You are violating Soviet sovereign territory." They were surrounded. On every side of the lake, tanks and armored personnel carriers rolled out of the forest, their cannons leveled at the agents on the ice. Hundreds of soldiers. It wasn't a recovery mission. It was a mousetrap. And the cheese was a hollow metal bird. Chapter 5. The Glass House. Thorne's instinct was to raise his rifle, but he knew it was a useless gesture. They were 20 men standing on a sheet of ice, illuminated like actors on a stage, surrounded by a mechanized battalion. "We surrender!" Thorne shouted, dropping his weapon. He signaled the others. "Down! Weapons down!" Some of the Alpha guys hesitated. They looked ready to fight and die. "Don't be stupid!" Thorne yelled at them. "You can't fight a tank with a rifle. Stand down!" One by one, the rifles clattered onto the ice. The Soviet soldiers moved in. They didn't rush. They moved with the confidence of men who had been watching this happen for hours. They were wearing white winter camouflage. They rounded up the Americans, kicking their legs apart, searching them for hidden weapons. Thorne was shoved roughly against the fuselage of the Aurora. A Soviet officer approached him. He was young, blonde, with ice-blue eyes. He wore a heavy wool coat with the collar turned up. "Major Thorne," the Russian said. Thorne froze. They knew his name. "I am Captain Volkov," the Russian said. "Welcome to the USSR. We have been expecting you." "The pilot," Thorne said. "Where is he?" Volkov smiled. It was a thin, cruel smile. "There never was a pilot. The Aurora was flown by remote control drone technology. We hacked your frequency 3 hours after takeoff. We flew it here. We landed it. We waited." "Why?" Thorne asked. "To see who would come for it," Volkov said. "And to see how many." Volkov gestured to his men. "Load them up." The remaining 21 agents were zip-tied and marched toward the trucks. But as they were being loaded, Thorne noticed something. The trucks weren't standard military transport. They were unmarked, black vans with reinforced windows. "Where are you taking us?" Jenkins asked as she was shoved in next to Thorne. "To the glass house," Volkov said. The doors slammed shut. The darkness engulfed them. The drive took hours. Thorne couldn't see out, but he could feel the road changing. From the bumpiness of a dirt track to the smoothness of pavement. They were moving inland. When the van finally stopped, the doors opened. They were in an underground hangar. Concrete walls, buzzing neon lights. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic. They were stripped of their gear, their coats, their dignity. They were given gray jumpsuits. They were separated. Thorne was thrown into a cell. It was a white cube, 4 white walls, a white floor, a white ceiling, a bright light in the center that never turned off. No bed, no chair, just a drain in the floor. This was the glass house. It was a psychological torture facility designed to break a man's sense of time and self. Hours passed, or maybe days. Thorne paced. He counted his steps. He recited the names of the 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers lineup. He tried to keep his mind sharp. Eventually, the door opened. Volkov entered, carrying a metal chair. He sat down and offered Thorne a cigarette. Thorne took it. His hands were steady, though he felt like screaming. "Your government has not acknowledged your mission," Volkov said, lighting the cigarette. "As far as the world is concerned, you died in a training accident in Alaska. A C-130 went down in a storm. Very tragic." "That's the game," Thorne said, exhaling smoke. "Indeed," Volkov said. "But here's the interesting part. We did not capture 40 men. We captured 21. Where are the rest?" "Dead," Thorne said. "In the pass. Your snipers took them out." "Ah, yes, the pass." Volkov nodded. "We found 12 bodies there." Thorne did the math. 40 agents, 12 dead in the pass. 1 died of hypothermia. 21 captured. That was 34. 6 are missing, Volkov said. "We have swept the mountains. No bodies, no tracks. They simply vanished." Thorne frowned. "That's impossible. The storm kills everyone," Volkov agreed. "Unless they had help." Volkov leaned in close. "We believe there is a third player in this game, Major Thorne. Someone who is not CIA and not KGB. Someone who took your 6 men. Thorne stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "We found footprints leading away from the ambush site," Volkov said. "Heading east, toward the Forbidden Zone, toward Site 17. "I don't know what Site 17 is," Thorne said. "Neither do we," Volkov admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It is an old Stalinist project, abandoned, or so we thought. But something is active there, and it seems your missing men went there." Volkov stood up. "I am going to make you an offer, Major. You are a cleaner. You solve problems. I have a problem. I cannot send my men into Site 17. It is restricted by the party. But if a group of escaped American prisoners were to go there, and perhaps destroy whatever is inside, you want me to work for you?" Thorne laughed. "Go to hell. I want you to survive," Volkov said. "I can execute you right now, or I can arrange for a security lapse. You, the woman Jenkins, and the boy Miller, you escape. You go east. You find your missing men. You neutralize whatever is at Site 17. And if you succeed, there is a border crossing 20 miles from there that will be unmanned for 1 hour." "Why?" Thorne asked. "Why help us?" "Because whatever is in Site 17 scares me more than the Americans do," Volkov said. He left the cigarette pack on the floor and walked out. The door clicked shut. Thorne looked at the pack. Inside, scribbled on the foil lining, were coordinates and a time. The mission had changed again. They weren't retrieving a plane. They were being hired by the enemy to investigate a nightmare. Chapter 6. The Escape. The security lapse happened 6 hours later. The power in the block flickered and died. The electronic locks on the cells clicked open. Thorne stepped out into the hallway. It was pitch black, illuminated only by the red emergency lights. He found Jenkins and Miller in the adjacent cells. They looked terrified, haggard. "What's happening?" Miller whispered. "A jailbreak," Thorne said, "courtesy of the management." They moved through the corridors. There were no guards. It was eerie. It was clearly staged, but the danger felt real. If they made a wrong turn, they'd be shot. They found a locker room near the exit. Their gear was there, minus the weapons. But there were parkas, boots, and a map. "This is insane," Jenkins said as she laced up her boots. "They're letting us go. They're pointing us at a target," Thorne said. "Volkov thinks there's something at Site 17, something that took the missing guys." "Site 17?" Miller asked. "What's that?" "We're going to find out," Thorne said. They exited the facility through a maintenance tunnel that dumped them out into the forest. The cold hit them like a hammer. It was night again. They had a map, a compass, and a head start. But they had no guns, no food, and they were deep in Soviet territory. "Which way?" Jenkins asked. Thorne checked the compass. "East, into the deep woods." They ran until their lungs burned. They ran away from the prison, but toward something unknown. As they moved through the silent, snow-choked forest, Thorne couldn't shake Volkov's words. 6 men missing. No bodies. Who took them? Or did they go willingly? And then, miles away, through the trees, they saw it. A pulse of blue light shooting up into the sky. It wasn't the aurora borealis. It was rhythmic. Artificial. It was coming from Site 17. "We aren't alone out here," Miller whispered. Thorne stopped. He looked at the snow. There were tracks, fresh ones. But they weren't human footprints. They were long, dragging marks, like something heavy being pulled, or something crawling. "Stay close," Thorne said. "The CIA sent 40 of us. The Russians took 21. 6 are missing. That leaves 13 unaccounted for." "Where are the other 13? Jenkins asked. Thorne looked at the blue light pulsing in the distance. "I think they're already at the site," Thorne said. "And I don't think they're human anymore." The wind howled, and for a second it sounded like a scream.